A 5, 6, 7, 8.
Ah, the Hollywood musical. The epitome of class and grandeur, the spectacle of the cinema. If you don't know, or you've been purposely ignoring it, musicals are the genre where characters express themselves through song and dance. But alas, like all good things, it had to come to an end. And movie musicals sadly passed away, along with the rest of the golden age of cinema. Or did they? No siree. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, prepare to be amazed as I prove to you how the movie musical isn't just alive and well, it's perhaps better than it was before. But let me not get ahead of myself. First, we need to see why this genre was so popular in the first place, and why did it briefly die? And why do so many people hate it? In the beginning, the style was influenced by musical theater. They consisted on large-scale productions, big budgets, extravagant sets and costumes. The camera simply stood static, recording the performance in front of them as if there was a live audience watching. It was dance director Busby Berkeley who innovated the way musicals were filmed. While other directors were purposely hiding the cameras in soundproof booths, Berkeley was having the camera dance with performers, placing it in weird angles and creating optical illusions, showing that movie musicals can do so much more than a theatrical production. Studios went nuts. As the demand for sound on film grew, so did the production of musicals. In the year 1930 alone, there was over 100 musicals made, and critics loved them for some time.
It's very clear to see.
My Fair Lady, Mary Poppins, and The Sound of Music were back-to-back successes at the box office, garnering 35 collective nominations and 18 wins at the Academy Awards. Movie musicals are almost always synced to the golden age of cinema, because it was the most popular genre of the time. But the storylines usually centered on romantic plots and the pursuit of happiness, and the songs were about superficial issues and lacked deeper emotions. Musicals provided a form of escapism. They weren't trying to be anything bigger than they were simply made for entertainment. Take a look at Singing in the Rain, considered by many one of the best musicals or simply best movies of all time. It tells the story of Hollywood stars caught in the transition from sound to film. It's genius, but its main purpose is to entertain. None of the songs are original to the movie. They were already standalone hits added to the film as an excuse to showcase the star power of Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds. It was made to make people laugh and to tap along in their seats, and it continues to do so till this day, but escapism became boring.
Lord in heaven!
What?
Oh, goodness gracious! Oh, I just can't believe it!
Thanks to some poor investments on bad musicals that failed to have semi-interesting stories, or at least, good actors, by the 60s, people stopped showing up to watch musicals. And the 70s came with the rise of more risque films like sci-fi, horror, and dramas that were socially conscious. There was a push for realism that singing and dancing just couldn't provide. Musicals began to fade, or die, if you will. Throughout the 70s and 80s, musicals were scarce, but the ones that did exist did a good job at changing the game and experimenting with what is now the contemporary musical.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome.
Directors like Bob Fosse, who directed Cabaret, were not just bringing newer and sexier dances to the screen, they were also changing the way that audiences view musicals. He adapted the way to film and edit musical numbers with close-ups and quicker shots, demanding the audience to pay attention to the intimacy of dance and performance. But those movies weren't enough to acknowledge the demand for films to tackle the hard realities of society.
What good is sitting alone in your room? Come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret.
Listen, if you hate musicals, it all probably boils down to how unrealistic they are.
I never talk about bad taste.
At the theater, it's so much easier to suspend your disbelief because you are aware that you're watching a production with actors on stage. But on film, everything feels so realistic. Until they start singing. But the 90s came with the Disney animated musical, which were easier to grasp because, well, they're animated. It's easier to believe in cartoon mermaids who sing about feet than it is to believe in gangs whose method of attack is snapping. Animated musicals didn't carry the same expectation as live-action musicals. But there was one musical that changed it all. One musical that resurrected the whole genre. One musical that knocked off the 21st century contemporary musical. I'm talking, of course, of 2001 Baz Luhrmann's Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge was the first musical to be nominated after Disney's Beauty and the Beast in the 90s, and Baz Luhrmann stopped at nothing to use the full potential of the cinema. His unique style made it so much different to anything that came before it. For starters, it wasn't based on an already existing stage musical. Its creation was fully thought out with the film medium in mind, and he used the music video culture as a source of inspiration for the film.
I was made for loving you, baby. You were made for loving me.
In the same way that Singing in the Rain used popular songs, Baz Luhrmann hand-picked radio hits to create a love story that felt relatable to audiences. His psychedelic visuals were in line with the MTV music videos that came before it. And while the story is reminiscent of classical Hollywood, it felt fresh through modern cinematic techniques.
You're supposed to say, and the Oscar goes to.
And the winner is Chicago!
The following year, Chicago won Best Picture, the first musical to win the award since Oliver in the 60s. In my opinion, the best stage-to-screen adaptation, Chicago connected with audiences because it strayed away from movie musicals with a good, respectable American male protagonist. The main characters are female, and they're anti-heroes. Lady Murs is looking for fame and fortune. It's a satire on corruption and fame. Unlike other musicals that glorify the entertainment business, Chicago's full of darker themes. Finally, the Hollywood musical was catching up to social issues that audiences were demanding, and the musical numbers were believable.
I'm gonna be singing.
Roxy.
These diegetic numbers existed solely in the imagination of the main characters. The years to come had at least one major movie musical per year. It also gave way to original musicals like Across the Universe that used the Beatles soundtrack to showcase the social issues of the 60s. And Enchanted that I mean, it's not deep or anything, it's just like a good musical and I think it should be more recognized. Other Academy Award nominated musicals like Les Miserables in 2012 and La La Land in 2017 have brought a new resurgence to the Hollywood musical by expanding on the capabilities of musicals on screen. I gotta be honest, I'm hopeful for what's to come. Maybe the genre isn't as strong as it was, but with the amount of musical adaptations already announced, and believe me, there's a lot. I get a little excited at the idea of musicals that cover relatable social issues in matters that only the film medium could do. So while the oversaturation of the genre was its death in the mid-20th century, maybe the slow birth of the genre might just be its salvation. In the great words of Julie Andrews, the Hollywood Hills are alive with the sound of musicals.
The hills are alive with the sound of music.
Thanks for watching.